good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world, and welcome to today's HDI webinar, Incident Management, More Critical Than Ever. Today's webinar is brought to you by HDI Conference and Expo and Service Management World, which is a new kind of service management conference coming to you this fall in Orlando, Florida. HDI Conference and Expo, of course, is coming up in just a couple of weeks. So if you have made plans to go there, hope to see you there. If you haven't, register now. I'm Roy Atkinson. I'll be your moderator today, and joining me will be Brandon Cottle. We have just a few announcements before we begin. If you are experiencing any technical problems, including audio, please refresh your browser. That is the best thing you can possibly do. If you wish to participate in the question and answers, then please ask questions anytime during the webcast, and we'll answer them during the Q&A session toward the end of the webcast. You will be able to download the slides from today's presentation by opening the Attachments tab on your BrightTalk screen. And the slides will advance automatically throughout the event. Remember that today's webinar will be available on demand shortly after the completion of this live webcast, and you'll receive an email reminder to let you know that it's available. You can stay in touch with HDI in a number of ways, including on Facebook, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, on Instagram, and Google+. And of course, our members-only site, connect.thinkhdi.com. There are several links available to you in the Attachment tab, so check those out. They give you a link direct to both the conferences that we mentioned and also to some other information. So with me today, as I mentioned, is Brandon Cottle. Brandon is a seasoned service desk and support industry practitioner and consultant with more than 20 years of experience working in and with Fortune 500 companies. As an industry visionary, he has driven ITIL and knowledge initiatives across multiple companies and countries. Today, Brandon leverages his KCS expertise, skill set, and experience to assess, implement, and evolve knowledge and CRM solutions in the technical service and support industry across multiple time zones and geographies. And we're going to be talking a little bit more about that as we get into the webinar. Thanks for joining me today, Brandon.
Hi, Roy. Thanks for having me on. Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are, or good evening, depending on when people are listening.
Exactly. And we should let people know in honor of transparency that we do know each other pretty well. We have both been affiliated with HDI for a long time, and we have met many, many, many times over the years at conferences and local chapter officer events and so forth. So Brandon and I are buds as it goes.
Yes, we are, and also in full transparency, I was trying to figure out what my Instagram password is so I could follow Think HDI as you put on the screen.
Well, there you go. Please do. All right, let's get talking about incident management. And I pulled some factoids out of some research that we have. Incident management is the most adopted process of any of the big long list of IT service management processes, usually cataloged in ITIL. 56% of organizations say that they use incident management. I wonder what the other 44% do, but there you go. They are doing incident management in some form. They just don't realize that they're doing it. Obviously, things go wrong and they have to be fixed, and that's the basis of incident management. And as we'll discuss today, there's a lot more to it. The second stat that I have up there is a little bit tricky to explain, but I'll do my best. In our 2017 Technical Support Practices and Salary Report, we say that 55% of organizations saw an increase in caseload year over year. That's about as clearly as I can state it. And for about the last 10 years running, more than half of organizations have seen an increase in overall caseload. That means the number of tickets. It's ticket volume, and that includes both incidents and service requests. But we also know from our research that 53% of the tickets that come through are incidents. So the majority of tickets are incidents, and the volume of tickets is increasing year over year and has done for many years. Next one is 56% of organizations, and this comes from a State of the IT report that we did, say incidents are on the rise. So in spite of our best efforts, the number of incidents is increasing year over year. And there it is, 53% of tickets are incidents. So just give me an idea, Brandon, what you think about the reasons why some of these things might be going on. What do you see in your organization that might lend itself to increasing the number of incidents?
That's a great question, and I think that's a very question a lot of people are actually asking right now is, why is this continuing to go up? We have so many tools and resources, anything, as some of the participants have said, we've got AI, we've got machine learning, but why is it going up? I think at the top, I see across organizations, Roy, complexity. We are at the most complex level for computer systems, for IT and IS that it's ever been. And here's the good news, it's only going to get more complex. We've never before had this many systems that are interdependent, this many nodes or endpoints. It's not, when we attend a seminar, a conference, and we listen to those who've gathered the data, either within our companies, our organizations, or without, I'm always staggered by how many people or how many endpoints people have. They may have a laptop, they may have a tablet, they may have multiple mobile devices, cell phones. These are adding to the complexity of hardware, where in the not too distant past, we really only had a desktop and maybe a pager, which is a very, I would say, dumb device. So I would think at the top, and I don't know if you're seeing this as well with your research, but the complexity and the number of applications and systems that we use and the integration, that definitely is a huge driver today.
Absolutely. And another thing that's happening, in addition to the complexity of the environment in general, and we'll talk about that a little bit more, one thing that tends to happen, as Charlie Betts mentioned in an article that kind of got me thinking along this topic line when we started discussing this webinar, is that there's legacy systems exist in a lot of industries that haven't been upgraded. They've been modified maybe to get along with the newer systems, but we're layering newer systems on top of older systems, and that just makes for a great deal of complexity. And so that's another factor in the increasingly complex world. There's also things like the advice of cloud. Everybody wants to go to the cloud, right? That's what everybody says, go to the cloud. So now you've got a mixed environment. You've got stuff that's in your data center. You have some things that are not in your data center. They reside in the cloud, or software as a service, which is probably a little more accurate than cloud. Cloud is kind of a murky term. It's a cloudy term, in fact. So there's lots of things that that factor in here. Another thing that we tend to forget about is really a simple reason that the number of incidents goes up year over year, and that's the fact that organizations grow. And the number one reasons, or number one and two reasons that incidents are going up, according to our research, is that there's a larger number of customers and there's a larger number of devices. And we also know that there's increasing complexity because there are so many devices per person. I mean, and my desk has a cell phone and a couple of laptops and usually a tablet, and we use all of those things in some aspects of our work. And so being able to support that, and we'll talk a little bit more about some of the newer things that people are supporting as well.
Oh, I totally agree. And can I throw one more in there, Roy?
Yeah.
I would say that our customer, our consumer, I really don't like the word end user, but our customers, their expectations are going up as well. And so we see that across the board, not only on the support side, but in software development, that the expectation is a consumer driven, and they're not wrong to do this. And so as we bring in those additional, whether they're enhancements or rooting out defects, whatever we're doing on either infrastructure or an application side, that adds that extra layer of complexity and can in turn raise call volume. And just a little note I wanted to ask you about here. Now, our numbers, it's all above 50% that things are increasing. I don't remember exactly, I don't have the survey in front of me, but it doesn't mean that necessarily the 40% are decreasing, because I believe there are some that are just maintaining as well, which would mean that, overall there's more work. There's equal or more work out there in the world, if that's right.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. So in light of all of those things that we've talked about that are pushing volume up and pushing the number of incidents up, let's get a feel for what's going on with our audience right now, and we're gonna put a poll in the field here. And the question is really simple: are incidents trending upwards in your organization? And you can answer yes, we're seeing more incidents now than in previous years. Not sure, we track ticket volume but don't separate incidents from service requests. Or no, the number of incidents has decreased in our organization. So go ahead and vote on that. Oh, and also an I don't know choice if you're not familiar with those metrics in your particular organization. So we'll let that poll sit there, and please do respond, and we'll let you. That's interesting. So far, as I'm watching, I'm not going to tell you what the results are in progress, but that's pretty interesting so far. And
I was going to say, it's kind of like watching election night returns here, but without the tinkering.
It is. We can watch the numbers change back here, and then we'll close the poll and let you see the responses. So, all right, we're going to keep it open for about another 5 seconds or so.
While these are coming in, Roy, can I add in one other thing here?
Sure.
You had mentioned cloud or SaaS. Each of these things that we in the industry, and all those who are listening, those that laid the groundwork before us and those that are after us, we see this cyclical nature of the projects. Many of us remember HIPAA and the complexity that brought in. We can remember stretching further back into Y2K for those in the financial sector or other sectors that SOX affected. So there are different things that come along that add because of legalistic, because of compliance, and those also add in the complexity to our applications, or perhaps hardening and securing our own infrastructure and organizations. And that in turn adds a layer of complexity, because our customers have to be able to navigate that and be able to generate revenue, to produce what they need to produce. And that often does create an additional, I'll say, not only a primary but a secondary source of this surge in issues. Yep, that's good insight. So we finished the poll. I stopped the voting on that, and 62% of you say that yes, you're seeing more incidents than in previous years. 12% of you say no. And so that's fairly similar to what we saw in our annual research. We saw that, as I mentioned, that 55% of the organization saw an increase, and about 15% saw a decrease. So not very different from the 62% increase and 12% decrease that you said here. So that's pretty interesting. And I don't know, 9% of you don't have access to those metrics or don't know them off the top of your head. That's fine. Don't worry about it. There are no points. You don't get awarded points. No prizes here. We won't be doing the Oprah, you get a car and you get a car at the end. So just hang in there. I also got a message that the PDF of the slides is not loaded in the attachments tab. I will rectify that as soon as it is possible. We can't do it while the webinar is in progress, but immediately afterward we'll make sure the slides get in there. And I also mentioned that the
the webcast is being recorded and will be available. And on this channel, it's pretty quick. Very shortly after the live webcasts, it will be available to you for recording. I'll make sure the slides are there too. Okay? Thank you for that. Let's move on. So this is a statement that's a few years old now. In 2013, Peter Sondergaard from Gartner said every company is a technology company. And I'm pretty hard-pressed to think about one that isn't. I was having a conversation recently with a friend of mine who's a CIO, and he was telling me about a local shop in his area out in the Pacific Northwest. That's a shoe repair shop. And very traditional. You take your shoes in, they'll put new heels on, new soles, they'll repair them, fix them up for you. So that sounds like an organization that wouldn't be dependent on technology until you stop and think about the fact that they have to take electronic payments, right? Credit cards. They probably, or a lot of smaller shops operate with a credit card reader that attaches to a tablet or a phone even, a smartphone. And so what does that mean? That means they have to have network connectivity. It means that their devices have to be functioning properly, including the device that reads the cards. They probably have a website that you can go to and learn about them. They may have social media channels that they talk about their products and services on. So even the smallest companies now are really dependent on all kinds of technologies. So as we've been saying, as we've gone along through this conversation, the environment, the technical environment, grows increasingly complex. So is there anything you would have to add to that, or anything you would disagree or agree with there, Brandon?
Oh, wholeheartedly agree. It is nearly impossible, I think, in our global economy to have any type of organization, whether it's the small corner store all the way up to the mega or umbrella companies that don't really use technology for nearly every step. And to bring it down to perhaps our listeners and our peers level is, if anyone ever thinks, well, but my systems aren't that critical, just try saying that to your CIO or CTO, that the ones that you work on are not critical, because they're all interconnected in some way that makes them, the potential there is huge. So I would totally agree, Roy.
Yeah, that's the other thing too, is we're not able to visualize in a lot of cases unless we have really good data visualization tools, all the interconnectedness. And I don't know about you, but I've lived through a data center failure, complete data center because of a power outage and an improperly maintained UPS set of batteries, and the entire data center went down. And the complexity of getting everything back up in the proper order because of all the dependencies between systems. This application has to load before this can load, and this database has to be operating before this application can be fired up. All of that complexity was immense, and that's going back about 8 or 9 years now. So the environment is amazingly complex at every single level.
And I think the more complex it is, we're definitely seeing more points of failure, more things that when we do a quote routine change or just a regular test swing, whatever it happens to be, those are things that are now connected that can fail. It's the smallest things. Daylight savings time. How much is connected? How much is affected? And yes, that happened recently, and again previously in the fall. And again, these things keep happening. So.
Absolutely true. So we're talking about the increased dependency on technology and also the need for speed. The need for speed is increasing constantly, and I always think of today's business environment as Jeff Goldblum in the Jeep in Jurassic Park going down the road trying to outrun the T-Rex, and seeing the T-Rex in the rearview mirror where it says, objects are closer than they appear. It was a great shot in Steven Spielberg's direction. But what he keeps saying in the Jeep is, must go faster, must go faster, must go faster. And that's how I visualize business now. It just, the expectations of customers have changed. They expect things right now. They expect 24/7 support, and we'll talk a little more about that. And they expect availability of merchandise. They expect your services to be available online 24/7. And when you look at the industry, some of the industries that I have listed there, healthcare, finance, of course, the military, but commerce and even education. Imagine what happens on a university campus when their classroom technology goes down and nobody can teach. Their lesson plans are unavailable. Their preloaded slides aren't there. They don't have the connectivity to the students to deliver the information they're supposed to get. All of that stuff that depends on this backbone of information technology. It's really critical. And of course, in healthcare, one of the things that I cite is a friend of mine, also an HCI member, who runs a service desk at a large regional medical center. And I've talked to him many, many times about some of the problems that he has in support. And he says that the clinical people don't call the service desk. If something breaks, they don't call. They don't notify the service desk simply because they don't have the time. They need to move on. If the doctor's iPad for the medical records doesn't connect and fire up exactly the way it's supposed to every single time, he's got 15 minutes or she's got 15 minutes to see that patient and move on to the next one. Otherwise, the hospital is losing money. And so there's this constant demand for throughput. There's a constant demand for the availability of data. There's all this critical information that we all depend on. It's not like reaching across your desk and picking up a notebook and flipping through the pages to find out what you need to know. Today, things are so centralized and so critical across the board. And it's just absolutely amazing. And you work in the financial world, Brandon, and I know that there are a lot of systems that are critical to your business's function.
Yes, and that story that you just related, that is so impactful. Whether it's revenue lost, whether it's I'll just say it, whether it's someone's life, someone's medical, people don't have the time. Customers don't have the time often to call and to wait or to chat or self-serve, and so we have to find a way to shift that all the way left to a negative one, so it self-heals, so that there's another option, so they can hot swap on the go. As a great mentor of mine has said for many years now, decades actually, is find those silent sufferers, because when you do, you're going to find out where the gaps are in the support that you're providing and in your hardware and in your software as well. And so that's just a astounding quote that you just gave us there about the hospital. On the same thing for the financial sector, whether it's let's take it as different areas that I've been in where it's retail, and when the point of sale device goes down for 2,000 stores across the world, they lose X number of dollars, euros, whatever the currency is, per minute that it's down. When customers decide, I'm going to walk out, or it's a restaurant and people aren't going to be seated because they're told, hey, we're going to have to do this with cash only or something. And in the financial sector, for banks, for anyone that's trading, literally millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions can be lost because of that opportunity cost, what happens right then, as well as transactions that fail. So these are huge things, and I wrote down must go faster, because that is going to be the mantra for the rest of our careers.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's not going to slow down anytime soon, that's for sure. So some of the newer challenges, of course, distributed denial of service attacks have been around for a while. Ransomware, boy, that had huge effects just during the past year. WannaCry and the other ransomware attacks that have happened. The national health system, speaking of healthcare, in Britain was affected by that. Hospitals in California and elsewhere in the United States were affected by that, where their data was locked up and they couldn't access it. Then you have things like data breaches that totally destroy the credibility of a company, throw their customers' information into the dark web or to the wind, as it were, and that has a huge effect on their ability to conduct business. It's really astounding how much of an effect on the global economy this stuff has now. And have you been affected by any of that, Brandon, or have you seen that in your industry where other organizations have been locked up with ransomware or experienced a serious data breach?
Oh, it definitely happens in the industry, and I would say that it's one of those quotes from almost 2 decades ago. This was said is it's not whether it's going to happen, it's when, and so we feel confident. I think in industry that we're always on the side that it's fighting uphill, right, against the bad guys. The bad guys have a lot of motivation to do this for various reasons, whether it's monetary or other things. And so we definitely are seeing this across all industries, in fact. So.
Yeah, that's true. So while we're in this bit of the conversation, I'm going to put another poll in the field here for you. And let's ask a question of our audience. And this one has to do with these big things that can happen. And let's ask about major incidents. So the question this time is, has your organization designated a major incident team? So do you have a dedicated team or a group of teams that are able to pull together rapidly if there's a major incident? And the answers are yes. When there's a major or priority one incident, the team gets involved. We have a major incident team, a plan, and we test the plan, which sounds like a really good course of action. We don't have a specific major incident team, but we do set up a war room to coordinate. Next possible answer is no. We handle major incidents on a case-by-case basis, and I don't know. Again, it's going to be maybe a small percentage. If you haven't gotten acquainted with your major incident team or you're not part of it, you may not know about it. So we'll let that go for a little bit more, and then we'll stop the voting and talk to you about what you said. All right, and I'm going to stop the voting. Let's publish that response. So 32% of you said when there's a, it just switched. 23% of you said when there's a major priority one incident, the team gets involved. So that's about a quarter of you. About 14% said we have a major incident team, a plan, and we test the plan. About 19%, so about a fifth of you said we don't have a specific major incident team, but we do set up a war room to coordinate. And about over a third of you said no, we handle major incidents on a case-by-case basis. I can tell you from personal experience that it can take quite a while to get things together if you're handling them on a case-by-case basis. If you're small enough and efficient enough, if you're a small organization, that's probably not so bad. But in a large organization, just taking the time to track people down and get them on a conference call or however it is that you communicate can take a substantial amount of time, and every minute that goes by, as Brandon mentioned, is money going up the chimney. So you might want to think about how to handle major incidents and have a standing major incident team. They don't necessarily have to be doing something all the time, but you want to know who's tasked with what, how to get hold of them in case of an emergency, and have them designate somebody in their stead if they're on vacation or out of the office at a conference or whatever. You want to be able to have that availability. Would you not agree, Brandon? And what does your major incident approach look like?
Oh, definitely. And I think as we move from the smaller, literally dozens of employees up into the hundreds and thousands, I think somewhere in the very low thousands is where we start seeing more of the major incident teams, the service recovery teams, up until we get the tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of employees and or touch points. Then we see that dedicated, usually around a data center or a NOC, where they're situated 24/7. It might flip around the world based on support time zones. I would agree, though, Roy. Even if you're a little bit of a smaller shop and you maybe only have hundreds of customers, employees, right? It still would behoove to set up and use some technology to be able to have everyone gets the text, the quick message that lets us know, hey, there is a major issue here. You've got some listed on the screen. We're being hit, and that could include definitely up to whatever the level is called in your organization that would equivalent to your CIO. We definitely would want to know pretty much instantaneously, and you would want to get the major incident team going. That's when you pull the digital binder and start down this. And so yes, I am seeing that. Unfortunately, it's only getting more, not less, as we battle uphill for this. But I don't think that once you get to you've got thousands of employees and above, I don't think it's possible to be very successful unless you have a dedicated process, a dedicated team that can respond.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with that, and especially in a case where you've got, increasingly organizations are becoming global. You have people in multiple time zones, multiple countries. The communication aspects of major incident management can be really challenging, and you better have it worked out in advance, because doing it in response to something going bad is very difficult, time-consuming, and very, very expensive, depending on the size of your business, of course, but it can run into the millions and millions of dollars. All right, let's move on a little bit here. And speaking of such things, increased workforce mobility, right? By 2020, like 75% of the workforce is going to be mobile. People are going to be moving around a lot. Working from home, working from your local Starbucks or your local co-working facility, much more distributed workers. And in terms of the support side of things, according to our research and report that's out currently, 28% of organizations say they have multiple sites in a single country, so not one location but many locations or several locations. And 16% of the support organizations that responded to us said they have support centers in multiple countries. So you've got all kinds of communications issues to think about. Again, time zones, language, all of that stuff that goes into having places in multiple countries. But luckily for us, we also have some really good communication technology, and I know that you take advantage of some of that, Brandon, in your role.
Oh yes, definitely, Roy. This slide, I'm actually thinking that the number probably is a little bit higher, and we maybe just haven't captured it, because not only in my organization today, where we have several hundred sites across the United States, but we also are in multiple countries. But many of our peers that I talk to, it is the same, and it is dispersed. And as we see our workforce continue to evolve, I think the companies that are really standing out and leading and creating the environment in which people do give their all and wish to stay there long term and make a change, they're offering up these opportunities so that people can relocate, whether it be for a personal family matter, whether it's desire to return to a certain area because of some things that have happened in their life. There's a number of reasons, because remember, we're not, although we do talk about artificial intelligence and robotics a little bit, we're talking humans here. And being able to offer people up that option really goes a long way. Our work, a lot of our work, as we've said, is digital. And we are able to, as we do, use instant message, use video cameras. It's really pennies to be able to do this, to have the video call. So in my role, whether my team is scattered anywhere across the time zones, our expectation is that we get on video and we talk. And so we don't require that people wear a suit or formal wear for this, but rather just have just your professional clothes on, and we talk. And so it really does quite a bit to reduce travel time, where we have meetings all the time with video, and then instant message, which is available. You can, through different ones, and of course we're not endorsing any of them, but they can be on your smartphone, so you can be sitting in a meeting. You can be at home and be able to respond to 24/7 things that you have. At the same time, balancing it out. And let's take the time we say, hey, this is my time that I'm off, and I'm only available via a cell phone call for this level of criticality. So I'm thinking that we're only going to see these numbers really go up, Roy, as we continue to evolve and our economy worldwide evolves.
Yeah, I agree. So many startups now that we're seeing are digital. They're out in the digital environment with websites and web connectivity and e-commerce and all of that stuff, which is available anywhere in the world, or pretty much anywhere in the world, except where governments have blocked it or so forth. Excuse me. But it's definitely going to go up. The call for multi-country, multi-time zone, multinational support is going to happen more and more and more as organizations become more global. Acquisitions, mergers, everything that's going on in the business world as well. So, and I should mention, by the way, that all of the stats, or most of the stats that I'm quoting here, are available to you in the HCI Technical Support Practices and Salary Report, which is a members-only publication. You can get it if you are a member by going to connect.thinkhci.com and looking under the Research tab when you arrive. If you'd like to get a look at those, just look at our thinkhci.com website and look for Practices and Salary Reports. It's under the pop-down menu that you hit on the main page. Take a look at what's there. It's a tremendous amount of information. It's available to you. We really appreciate people's participation in giving us the data, and we like to share that data as much as possible. So here's another one. This is interesting too. This is also from our report, which in 2016, 28% of support centers said that they were using intelligent swarming. 2017, that jumped up to 34%. That's a pretty substantial rise in the period of a year.
Oh, yeah.
And so what we're seeing is probably an ongoing transition from using traditional tiered support, level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, however many you have, to a more swarming approach, which gets people grouping together around an issue to get it resolved rapidly. So much more bent on collaboration, similar to the approach that we've been talking about with having a major incident team, having a war room set up, but on a day-to-day basis, having the ability to work with groups through collaborative interfaces to resolve customer issues as you go. And are you seeing more of this as well, Brandon?
Oh, most definitely. And I want to also say for the Practices and Salary Report, I have relied on this for over a decade, and really our peers across the industry, literally hundreds of organizations who provide their information so that we can see what the trends are and what we can do to improve in our own organization. So I am seeing this and seeing the increase. I think that some of our ways, I'll call them legacy methods that we've used in industry for quite a while, are being overturned by things like intelligent swarming. Instead of going with a very tiered level 1 collects all the data and then passes to level 2, but instead we're using the processes, and I know that there's several derivations out here, so I'll rely on you to steer us into any specific one we wish to discuss today. But being able to, say, collect the information up front with that customer touch, and in some cases actually ring the bell, as it were, and alert that, hey, we have, since we're talking about major incidents a lot today, be able to alert that we have a major incident while we have that customer literally in touch with us, and being able to have a quick, rapid response. And we just talked about this in the last 10 minutes, of being able to alert through technology, through messaging, through, in some cases, your desk phone, your cell phone rings, and your instant message all pop up at once to let you know we're having this issue, and getting that brain power on it. Now, it may be two different phone calls or communication channels where one is between the front line and the customer, and then the front line is turning and be able to participate and be that go-between, because let's be honest, we often don't want to expose our customers to the back end and all the confusion that sometimes can be happening. However, the gains are huge, and I think that's why we're seeing such a leap in only a year. They went up by almost a quarter from 1 year to the next. It's like 22%, I think.
Yeah, substantial increases. And so I'm going to put another poll up for you now, and this one kind of takes it down a notch from the major incident concentration. We talked about the major incident team and whether or not you have one of those. And we're going to talk about how you handle incidents in general. And this has to do with whether or not your organization has a dedicated incident manager. So is there somebody or somebodies in larger organizations, you may have more than one, of course. Does your organization have a dedicated incident manager? The choices are no, teams handle incidents as needed. Yes, we have an incident manager who coordinates efforts, or I don't know, maybe you don't have access to that information. So let's see how this goes. We'll leave the poll up there for a little bit longer and let you vote. And we'll see how you're handling incidents on a day-to-day basis in your organization. They're kind of playing catch up on the percentages here. It's kind of interesting to see them change. And we'll stop the voting now. Okay. And then, so what we see is this. The biggest percentage of you is say, yes, you have an incident manager who coordinates efforts. So good for you. 56% of you said you have an incident manager. So there's somebody whose responsibility is to oversee incident management in general and make sure that things are being taken care of the way they should be. And 44% of you said, no, the teams handle incidents as needed, which may also be good if you have autonomous teams that are handling things well. It depends on what the rest of your metrics look like, of course, what your time to resolve is and so forth and so on. But that can also be a good thing. Probably a little bit more formalized if you have an incident manager. None of you said, I don't know. So everybody's familiar with their organization in this regard. So that's good. Terrific. Good for you. And onward. So let's talk about the consequences of not handling incidents as well a little bit more. And to try to talk about your organizations going forward. And so some of you have dedicated response teams, and a good portion of you said, in fact, that you do in fact have a team that is has a plan. So 14% of you said we have a major incident team, a plan, and we test the plan. And that was my idea for emphasis here. Every minute of downtime is valuable. In some organizations, I mean, there's a recent event, I don't know if you remember this one, it was about 3 years ago or so. Some squirrels ate through the insulation on some cabling in a building near the New York Stock Exchange and took an entire system down. So you can imagine what happened with a stock exchange. I'm sorry, it was NASDAQ. It was the NASDAQ stock exchange that went down, and because of squirrels. Who could have foreseen that? Nobody, unless they were in there eyeballing the cables every week and seeing that the squirrels were enjoying chowing down on the insulation. But you never know when this is going to happen, and so having a team at the ready is a really good thing. One of the most impressive displays of preparedness I've ever seen was also at a medical center. I was touring the data center there, and as we went through, I was asking a question about their backup system. Having been through that big data center failure that I was talking about earlier, I was asking about their UPS, their energy backup. And the gentleman who was the head of the data center put his hand on the master power switch and said, "Oh, you want to see how it works?" He had complete confidence that if he flipped that switch, the hospital would not even see a hiccup. That's tremendous confidence. And I said, "Are you really that confident?" And he said, "We test it 5 times a week." And so having that practice in your pocket is a really good thing, to know who the response teams are, how they're going to respond, exactly what their roles are, I mean, if you think about it, look at the way the military operates. Look at the way the first responders operate, and this is where we can learn from those first responders. You know, we look for solutions outside IT sometimes, and everybody on that fire truck knows what their role is. Who's in charge of taking care of the hose? Who's going to be at the nozzle? Who's going to climb the ladder? Who's going to do this? Does it always work out exactly as planned? Of course not. Things are unpredictable. But the only way you get good at this is by practicing it. And make sure that you have your communication channels, as Brandon was just talking, all the different means of communication that he uses in his work, and practice and test it. Make sure that when you push the button and you think the communication is going to get where it's going, make sure that it actually does. That's really important. And so, do you have any kind of drills? And obviously, some people who are on here do. Do you have any kind of practices for this type of stuff, or you have a plan that you execute periodically, Brandon?
Oh, definitely. In fact, this past week was a major disaster recovery test that we have. So we have this multiple times throughout the year, different applications, different systems, all being able to swing things from coast to coast or in between, so we have multiple points of failure. Even as companies are, excuse me one second. All right. Even as companies are moving to the cloud or changing their systems, we still need to be able to deal with outages, so that as things happen, maybe everything is perfectly running, but yet things are, quote, down. We should be able to do that. And so I'm a big advocate for that. And if your organization has it, you should be participating in it. If your organization does not have it, then you should start it. You should start with just your part of the organization. So obviously, if you're a C-level here, you're going to want to be driving the whole thing. Whether the CIO, the CFO has a vested interest in this, and as they say on the slide here, every minute is valuable from a monetary standpoint, and then all the other things that trickle out. Let us learn from the disaster preparedness of organizations, like you said, Roy, the military, critical services such as police and fire, and from our partners in the medical industry. I was just blown away by the story you related there of that gentleman was ready to flip the switch because he was so confident. Did you say they test it 5 times a week?
Yes.
Wow. For us to be able to do, let's say, even a weekly or a monthly test, that is great. And there's a lot of little steps in here, and there are many folks much more qualified than I to speak about this. However, it's things like doing the tabletop exercise and being part of that in a room for half a day when you walk through how you do things. And as you start the exercise, or maybe it's halfway through, just ask everyone to put their phones in the middle of the table away from them and say, now how do you contact your employees or your peer teams? How do you escalate if your cell phones are down? If your cell phone somehow gets lost, is there a backup paper copy somewhere? We don't think about it. Is there a way to access it? How do we do that? And so there's so much to be gained here and really nothing to be lost from investing time into looking at what other organizations are doing specifically. Oh, yes, and you put this up, the firefighting, exactly. And true, hopefully, let's knock on wood, we don't have those large-scale disaster recovery. However, we know that natural events and other things do happen. So let us be prepared, and then let's ripple it down as well, or maybe we ripple it up from our day-to-day incidents that we have. And so I think there's such a huge benefit from this.
Exactly so. And so these are some of the topics that we've already talked about. If you want to look up more about the incident command system, you can look that up online. There's a Wikipedia article about it to give you a basic idea what that's like. Lots of links in that Wikipedia article. You can look at how it works. You can look at some organizational directions on it. The incident command system obviously may not be directly applicable to IT in your organization, but maybe give you some ideas on how to structure your incident teams and your response teams so that going forward you can avoid the hesitations and the uncertainty that you might have and have systems in place that you can fall back on in case something bad happens. So you might want to just take a look at that, and don't be afraid ever to look outside IT for good practice, because they're out there all over the place, and nobody ever said ITIL was an ideology. It's a framework. So let's make sure that happens. Before we get to your questions, and we have a few, let's just refresh ourselves here. Complex systems can and do fail. And as Charlie Betts said in that article I referenced earlier on the Forrester blogs, it's not going to stop anytime soon. Complex systems are growing more complex, and systems fail. Things go wrong. Things break down. Organizations are increasingly dependent on technology, especially on IT, as we talked about, how every business is a technology business, right? Failures can result in very expensive downtime, whether you're a small business or a big business. It can really hurt your wallet when things go wrong. So incident management is critical. That's the bottom line. That's where the title of today's webinar comes from. And effective incident management is the result of proper coordination and the use of all three of the big things, right? People, process, and technology. The people have to understand their roles, the process has to be defined, and the technology has to be there so that they can communicate and resolve things rapidly. You have anything to add to that list, Brandon?
No, it's a perfect summary of what we've done, and I'm aware that everyone who's on this webinar, everyone who's asking questions is here because they want to make it better for their organization and for our evolution as a whole in the industry. So thank you.
Great. So let's move forward into the Q&A period here. Please, before you depart, take a moment to rate the webinar. We hope that we did a good job for you, and you help us out when you let us know whether we're doing well or could do better. So please just take a minute to do that. And as I mentioned, we'll get the PDF of the slides posted as rapidly as we possibly can. Sorry about that. It should have been up there, and it's not. So let's go to some questions from you folks. What products would you recommend to implement intelligent swarming? Well, HDI is a vendor-neutral organization. We don't recommend products in particular, but there are lots of communication tools out there that might be useful to you in intelligent swarming. If you want to read more about how intelligent swarming works, I will recommend to you that you head over to thinkhdi.com and just put intelligent swarming in the search, and there'll be quite a bit of information that will pop up for you. But again, we don't recommend specific products or tools. Okay, next question. How dedicated is the incident manager typically to that responsibility, or do they wear multiple hats? And what are those other hats? Brandon, do you want to take a stab at that one?
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a kind of it depends answer, I feel, Roy, depending on the size of the organization, the complexity. So I've seen that, and where I am today, our incident manager is dedicated. But then again, when you have 10 or 15 or 20,000 employees and your IT, the number of IT issues is high, commensurately high, you'll see that. In small organizations, I've seen it where the incident manager definitely wears multiple hats. Among them, often problem, maybe even change. Those are the trio that often go together within the ITIL and IT service management world. So I would say it definitely depends on the size and complexity. I would encourage people to look at what you're trying to do. There are many, many best practices out there, as Roy said, within the HDI community. If you head over there, log in, look and see what resources are there, and then map to what you need specifically, and then you'll be able to come up with a ratio. Is it definitely a full-time job? Is it part of a team because things are that complex and you need that amount on it? And as you're saying, well, do we need it or do we not? What is the cost benefit if you can reduce your incidents? And again, going into problem here, but if you can reduce those adequately, what can you give back to the business? What would that do to the revenue? These are questions that you'll want to be having and pushing upwards into the business side, into the product side, into your sales team will love you, your financial people will love you because you're trying to, and you will, bring more value to your customers.
Yeah, well put. And we have a kind of a question that's attached to that. The person said, I see the need for incident management, but what's your opinion on having problem management or change management? Are they necessary? I can tell you a multitude of stories as why change management is a really good thing. Now, does that mean that you have to establish a change advisory board that meets every 2 weeks and approves every single change in the organization? Absolutely not. It does not mean that, but it's sure a good idea to have some kind of change control in place, because if you don't, you have tremendous exposure to risk. And actually, might be a good time for you to go back to last month's webinar, which was all about managing risk and how change management can help you do that, because we've talked a lot today about how dependent on technology businesses are and institutions are. And when something is introduced into the environment that shouldn't be and causes a ripple effect that breaks stuff, then that should have been reviewed someplace. But take a look at last month's webinar with Greg Sanker about change management and risk management and how they're interconnected. And I think it'll be very much worth your while. Problem for sure, you want to reduce those. You want to reduce the future incidents. If you can resolve things to the point where it's not going to happen again, this is all good. Okay? Good question. How do you convince C-level management to invest more into disaster recovery planning?
Yeah, that's disaster recovery in our context, right, Roy?
Yeah, that's
okay.
Yeah, disaster recovery. That's a tough one. It's probably a topic for a different webinar, disaster recovery planning. But I think that the challenge is the same no matter what you're trying to convince a C-level management to invest in. Develop a really good business case. Show them the possibilities. They don't want to have their business on a front page of a magazine because there was a major disaster at their company that was caused by something they could have controlled and could have gotten restored more rapidly. It can happen to anybody, anytime. Fires, floods, incidents, plane crashes. It can happen anytime, anywhere. So there's certainly an argument to be made for disaster recovery planning. Anything to add there, Brandon?
You said it, and I think that's a topic in and of itself. So we can't really do it justice here, but I'd follow what you said.
Okay. Well, we've got a little less than a minute left. I think we're wrapped up with the questions now. We'll get those slides posted. Thank you so much for attending today. Brandon, thank you very much for coming on and sharing some time with me and sharing your insights from your organization and your experience. So I thoroughly appreciate it, my friend, and I hope to see you in Las Vegas at HDI Conference.
Always a pleasure, Roy. Thank you, and thank everyone.
Thank you all for attending, and we look forward to seeing you. There's a special webinar on March 28th featuring some award winners of HDI Service Management Awards. That's next week. You can go ahead and register right here on Bright Talk. There's a link in the attachments folder, and I would just leave you with this thought. This webcast is copyright 2018 by United Business Media, LLC. The presentation materials are owned by or copyrighted, if that's the case, by HDI, which is solely responsible for its content, and the individual speakers are solely responsible for their content and their opinions. On behalf of HDI, thanks for your time and have a great day.